Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. Good evening and welcome to another live edition of Hudda Tonight. I'm Ali Coleman. I'll be your host for tonight's program. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, this is a live program providing some of the latest news and information from throughout the Muslim Ummah and also having important discussions. Today's date on the Islamic Hijra calendar is the 24th of Rabi' al-Thani, 1437. And on the Christian calendar, it's the 3rd of February 2016. Thank you again for tuning in. Tonight, for our news segment, we will go to an announcement that's been made, some concerns that have been expressed by a Philippine member of parliament who happens to also be a Muslim and a former separatist leader that is conveying some very deep concerns that he has that the country could be plunged back into all-out warfare internally, that is, because of the armed militia among the Muslim majority in the Bang's moral state. They have, after 17 years, achieved a political agreement that establishes autonomy in this area that is dominated by Muslims in the southern Philippines. However, the parliament has not approved the bill, and they are taking a recess for the upcoming elections, and there are some concerns that we're going to take a closer look at. We also go to Pakistan tonight because of the cancellation of many dozens of flights of Pakistan's national international airline company because the workers are against a movement to privatize the airline. And we will look at this as well as go to Britain, where the Muslim Council of Britain is launching a nationwide mosque visitation day. We'll take a look at this campaign and also go to the United States to look at a hijabi sister who has qualified for Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the second segment of Hudda Tonight. We are going to be talking in this segment about the ongoing crisis in Iraq. This is very unfortunate. We have a number of crises throughout the Muslim Ummah, just in the Arab world alone. And we want to try as best we can to understand exactly what's going on. We've invited a professor of political science and strategic studies, Dr. Emaad.muhanna. Assalamu alaikum, doctor, and welcome.
Welcome to you, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Thank you for continuing to be with us.
Thank you.
All right, so, you know, we need to try and understand the historical context of this Iraqi situation. Incidentally, just a quick side note from my personal life, I first encountered Islam as a soldier. I went to, I was a part of the force in '91 that went to Saudi Arabia after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
the Desert Storm.
Desert Storm. That's right. That's right. That's how I first encountered Islam, as a matter of fact.
And definitely, it was written for you.
You're right.
That's how God really invited you. I think the crisis in Iraq go about 10 years before that. In 1979, when the Iran started the revolution, you know, with that, parallel to that was the relationship between Iraq and Iran started to be affected by accusations on both sides. And in 1980, September, the first attack started on the border, and from that escalated and lasted for about 8 years. So the first really war, the Iraqi war, let's call it, was between Iraq and Iran and lasted for about 8 years, major destruction on both sides. And the funny thing, the strange thing that you will find that Iran is always a denominator in the crisis that goes around Iraq. In 1990, when Iraq basically overtook Kuwait, which definitely was a wrong thing, and started to threaten Saudi Arabia and other Arab Gulf countries, and the gathering of more than 45 countries in the world, and it was classified as a World War III at the time, and that's what you attended in the Desert Storm. And that lasted for a couple of years, and then started to see from that on major displacements of Iraqis and the disarmaments of the Iraqi army. And continued until we got to 2003, which is the third World War, or the third Iraqi war, based on the false accusation or claim of United States government that Iraq basically holds weapons of mass destruction. And based on that, they attack them, and this is what we see now as a result of this displacement of over 4 million Iraqis internally and about 2.5 million externally, besides major destruction to the infrastructure that's in Iraq. And from that, what we see, we're going through a civil war scenario and the division of Iraq into 3 states, the Kurds, Shia and Sunnis. On top of that, we've got the major enemy of the world now, Daesh or ISIS, and they're controlling major parts of Iraq. It's actually surrounding Baghdad, and I've got the map right here. We're looking at a number of regions and provinces around Baghdad. So hopefully the Iraqi army will regain its force or power to stop this threat to the Arab national security.
In the past times, I want to follow up with a question going back even further in history than 30 years. Previously, I remember we were talking about Yemen, and you had said that you were linking this to some of the crises that we faced in the Middle East, to a plan, a Western plan to carve up the states.
That's right, the new Middle East, which was described by Condoleezza Rice at the time, the anarchy or the creative anarchy. Basically, just to remind the respected viewers, it started with a meeting in 1907 in London with the Zionist organizations to basically plan how they're going to survive in the Middle East and how they plan to have a national state for the Jews. That's 1907.
This is coming up just before the collapse of the Ottoman Empire.
That's right, in 1923. And then continued, but the first maps we've seen were in 1954. That's 2 years after the revolution in Egypt, 1952. And for the first time in 1954, we started to see maps of the new Middle East. The plan, in brief, looks at 56 countries to divide them into 88. And that basically includes south of Europe, north of Africa, the Arab Peninsula, Iran, Iraq, and the southern part of Russia, or the Soviet Union at the time.
In short, divide and rule? Is that
divide and rule. And they started to look at ideologies to basically use it as a tool for division. So some of it based on ethnicity, some of it based on religion, some of it based on political ideologies. So whatever serves the purpose, they basically tackle it. And what they found in the Middle East, because the language is the same, religion is almost the same, despite some Shia, they found that the ethnic differences were really the major part where they can play. So in Egypt, they looked at Christianity versus Islam. In the Gulf region, they looked at Shia versus Sunnis. And this is really that is causing the chaos and the anarchy in that area. And Iraq is just part of it. They always looked at the Middle East power into 3 corners really, Egypt, Syria and Iraq. The major forces to basically can stand against them. So they started with Iraq, and then now with Syria, and Egypt was the plan in 2011.
But unfortunately, Professor, this plan is unfortunately very effective.
It is very effective, and they basically play it on a strategic planning. Basically, have a number of steps they achieve and build on that. And we probably discussed that in the beginning was the military confrontation. If they want to attack a country, they just attack it by force. But now they started to look at cultures and education. And with what they did, starting from 1980 particularly, was to try to destroy culture, manipulate media, destroy education, destroy health, and destroy the administrative system in a country. So what you find is that creating nations in the Middle East, and if you apply the 4 factors I'm going to say, you will find them definitely exist. To be a nation without culture, without education, without health, and without administrative. So you find high corruption rate, you find health destroyed, you find no education or very poor education system, and culture through the media, and deviation even from the main course of Islam. If you achieve these four factors, the military confrontation becomes one way. So you find people that fighting for different ideologies, and this is where the civil war starts. So civil war is through different groups understanding different ideologies. And because you have different levels of cultures, different levels of education, you find that your understanding of nationalism or patriotism totally different to mine.
Right.
And we both claim that we both love the country, but we actually doing it absolutely different.
Yeah.
And we might fight because I think that your approach is against the country, and you fighting me because you think my approach is against the country, and we are both wrong. So this is exactly what's happening. Sunnis are fighting the Shias, Christians and Muslims are fighting, and they both destroying their own land. This is really the fact.
Yeah, unfortunately. Okay, so you said that according to this plan that you understand that the West has to carve up, divide and conquer, that they would use religion, ideology, and ethnicity where possible. Can you talk about the role that Iran plays in all of this? Obviously, I mean, if this is the so-called base of Shia Islam.
Iran is the pivot of the Middle East collapse, because it really it is the flag of Shia in the region. It is the leader of Shia in the region. So when we looked at the different factors they try to use to divide the Middle East, the Sunni Shia is the strongest. That's the one that is very effective, and they can divide the countries and basically get them to fight each other. Because Christianity and Islam is not that strong as an ideology. It might work in Egypt, but it might not work in the Gulf region because of the low number of Christians in those regions, so it's not going to work. But what definitely can work because of the solidity of the Shia is the fight or the conflict between Sunnis and Shia. Very effective. You find that might have that in Saudi Arabia, might have that in Iran, in Bahrain, in Emirates, in Oman, in Iraq. So that entire region, and if you look at the Sham, you've got that in Syria, you've got that in Lebanon. So the Sunni Shia is definitely the strongest and the most powerful approach to follow and capitalize upon. So Iran is the leader of the Shia in the region. Number two, Iran is trying to build the new or the old empire, rebuild the old empire to have a Shia empire in the region. And that basically means that they will always have plots in the Middle East to create a chaos in the region and basically create a civil war. And you can see from there they have a support for Hezbollah. They have a support in certain other parts in Yemen. In Syria, they have a hand in Saudi Arabia with the execution of the Saudi citizen. A couple of weeks ago, they had a hand, in terms of creating a chaos. So Iran always plays a role on how division is done. And I think the long negotiations around the nuclear program basically was a preparation. So in the end, the Western society can give Iran a free ride. You basically control your nuclear program. Against that, we will give you the support to have the empire and capitalize on that. And that you can see they already start to supporting Houthis in Yemen. So they support the Houthis in Yemen, they support in Syria, Bashar, they support in Lebanon and Hezbollah, they're supporting Daesh, so they are everywhere. So it is definitely a denominator.
And also
in the whole
Hamas
thing.
in Gaza Strip, is that correct?
Absolutely,
okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, are you saying that this is a matter that the leaders in Iran are deliberately, purposefully doing this for the purpose of destabilizing, or is it just as a matter of Is it just the way it works out?
No, it is definitely intended destabilization, because if you look at the fourth and fifth generation war, first and second were, face to face and fighting, and the beginning was the first generation of war. We're talking about two organized army. The second generation, we're talking about militias. The third generation, talking about terrorism, and the fourth and fifth generations, we're talking about information and the war through others. So as we always say, that in a fourth and fifth generation, you might find yourself fighting on behalf of somebody who is already having a holiday in Hawaii.
A proxy war.
A proxy war, absolutely. So what Iran is doing is a war on behalf of the major powers. So instead of country X or Y getting into the Middle East and divide it, now we create Iran, give them back the $40 billion they had withheld, in the sanction, give them back, give them the legitimacy to basically support the groups we want to divide the Middle East.
Historically, before Iran, the Iranian Revolution in '79, what role did Iraq play in this dynamic that you're describing for us?
Iran has always had that passion to have, the empire, the Persian Empire. And Iraq was definitely the shield to protect the Middle East and protect the Arab national security.
So that, and the proof that by your view, made it a target.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you look at Iraq, for example, when it was there during even Abdul Karim Qasim, before Saddam Hussein, the Arab national security never suffered the threat of Iran. So now you find that Iran is having a problem with Emirates around the islands. Iran threatened basically Saudi Arabia, threatened to create a major civil war in the Middle East. That's because the shield is not there. So Iraq has always stood as a shield at the forefront to protect the Arab national security from the Persian passion to create their own empire on the expense of the Arabs.
So the Iraqi, the strength of Iraq was very instrumental.
Absolutely, and to the existence of the Arabs.
Just as a side note, going back to the Iran-Iraq war, 8 years, who was the victor in that?
It was Iraq, and was this with the support of Egypt in 1988, because it reached a point was Iraq getting very weak. It was basically Iran was acquiring weapons from the United States, so it was really about the time that Iraq was going to collapse. And joining some Arab forces from Egypt, I think that finished the war in 1988. And I think from that time, the Western society started to look at other approaches to tackle Iraq. It was never finished in 8 years, so you can see 2 years down the line, they basically instigated the Gulf War, and it was his mistake. We've got to be absolutely fair. Saddam Hussein, absolutely, to take over Kuwait. But it was based on promises from the United States. The ambassador was Taylor. She was the ambassador of United States in Iraq, and basically the other ones that informed him that that Kuwait steals oil from your land and created that sort of argument. So they basically pushed him to commit that mistake.
Feeding information that...
Absolutely, absolutely. And the same thing had happened between Saudi Arabia and Egypt at the time.
Now, speaking of feeding information, false information, this brings us to Colin Powell, General Colin Powell, making this testimony at the United Nations, saying that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction to justify an invasion. It's always been a bit confusing. The United States suffered an attack in 2001, and then somehow found a way
to get into Iraq.
On this false information.
After the collapse of the World Trade Center in 2001, they got into Afghanistan. and then from there get into Iraq. And a lot of movies and clips basically proves that it was an inside job. And just to remind the
wait, that's a big. What do you mean inside job?
It was an inside job inside the United States.
The terrorist attack in the U.S.?
Absolutely, it was never a terrorist attack. It was an inside job, and a lot of movie. And I've heard it from the chief of the Los Angeles police, the head of police in Los Angeles,
yes.
that he actually spoke that the Egyptian Secret Service informed the CIA of the attack 24 hours before it happened. That's number one. Number two, if you look at the history of World Trade Center, World Trade Center was attacked in 1994 and I think in 1998, but it never collapsed. Why? Because in 2001 it was hit at the actual foundation that carries the building. It's a specific points that can affect it because it's on zips and on steel.
The eyewitnesses reported, first responders, firefighters, police, that they heard a series of explosions as if it was a demolition.
Absolutely.
And this is
absolutely. It proves what I was saying.
Yeah.
That's number two. Number three, it's impossible. And we're not here accusing the United States. I'm just explaining to respective viewers because I do respect Al-Huda and I think that the truth is part of what you do. Number three, it's impossible to hijack an airplane from the ground. Impossible. Because of security. Anywhere in the world. You can probably hijack it when it's on the air, but not from the ground. So they're saying taking 4 airplanes from 4 different airports into 4 different places, and you say that disappeared off the radar. One of them was going into the Pentagon. I mean, you cannot go to the defense ministry in the poorest country in the world without being spotted. So are you telling me that you can get into the Pentagon without being spotted? And no one was in Pennsylvania. Number 4, you find a lot of cameras were prepared, and those are not footage of normal citizens taken footage by mobile camera. It's definitely professional footage. If you look at after that the 2 buildings take 30,000 people working on them. They saying that 6,000 died. Where are the other 24?
Yeah.
A warning was issued from the Jewish embassy to the Jews in that region, don't go to work at the time. We're talking about 9 o'clock almost, so the 30,000 supposed to be there at the time.
Yeah. I'm sorry to distract you. That claim that you made is just something that I don't often hear. It's getting, you know, it's
absolute logical analysis of what happened, definitely. We're not saying who's wrong and who's right, but what we're saying is it basically supports what you initially started, that the actual accusation was false.
So all of this,
Colin Powell.
All this leads to the point that to find an excuse to get into Iraq.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's the fact. And from there, and let's also be fair that a lot of Iraqis were involved in betraying Saddam Hussein, because when the Americans got into Iraq, the army was already broken. They got into the airport, and it was so easy for them. But definitely, without betraying or betrayal from different high-ranked soldiers, they would never be able to get in there.
I understand.
So what we got after that is the collapse of Iraq. And if you look at one very clear point on the bombing of Iraq, they were bombing the infrastructure. You're not bombing military sites, which basically you break in the country, not the army.
To achieve the other goals that the 4 that you talked about.
Absolutely. So you've got now spread of disease, the factories, companies all collapse, so you've got no economy. So you get to the point is culture, education, administrative system, and health. And in the end, you've got no money to cover that.
Remind us, go back and remind us what the international response was. When the United States invaded Iraq, as you said, it was first Afghanistan, and then eventually Iraq.
Definitely, the United Nations Security Council relied on the report of the nuclear agency led by Dr. Mohammed Baradi, the Egyptian professor in law, and he reported that there's no weapons of mass destruction of Iraq based on the fact that they already accused Iraq before and there was inspection. So in 2002, 2003, the reports clearly state no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq based on a nuclear agency reports. It's not bias reports. It's the actual United Nations agency.
The INEA,
yes, that was head by Dr. Mohammed Baradi, and he took Nobel Prize for that. But what we're saying is United States basically ignored the refusal of Security Council to attack Iraq, because if you actually go back to history, and respected viewers can go back in history, they find that the Security Council never approved the attack of Iraq, because there is no solid grounds. They stood passive.
Unilaterally.
Absolutely. They stood passive. And based on that, the United States started, and followed by the tail, United Kingdom. And from that on, the whole thing escalated. The collapse of Iraq. And we can also look at another major issue, that the collapse of Iraq means the increase in oil prices, because Iraq is a second country that supplies oil, which basically means that if you've got stock, you can control and manipulate the oil prices. So the destruction of Iraq basically had consequences. And let's go back and see why oil, because China was getting into the Iraqi oil, having a number of contracts with Iraq to basically draw the Iraqi oil in to support the expansion, industrial expansion in China. And for the United States to stop the expansion of China, they had to attack Iraq.
China was increasing its purchase.
Absolutely.
Import of Iraqi oil.
It was getting into major contract to have the sole buyer of Iraqi.
Intolerable for the
absolutely the power balance. And so when we look at any event, it is always it always serves more than purpose. So it achieves the new Middle East. It stops or slows the Chinese industrial expansion. It threatens the Arab, and it basically, more than that, put pressure on Saudi Arabia to give us money, or to give them money. Otherwise, we'll leave Saddam Hussein to attack you. And that's basically the abuse of the Arabs throughout the last 30 years.
I remember a common sense question about this invasion. If, in fact, the United States knew that there were weapons of mass destruction, they would not invade.
That's right.
Right? It's only because they knew that there were none that they were free to come in.
It basically confirms the say, you shoot first, you die second. It's a fact. But let's ask ourselves a question. Why does this, or all of this happens in the Middle East? Despite the fact that there is resources, but I think because we've got poor, uneducated, illiterate, and some of them are actually betraying their own nations, the leaders that allowed the United States and 45 countries to get into the Middle East. One of them was Mubarak. I believe that these people, such as Mubarak, betrayed their own nations, allowing these people. And since that time, the Americans never left, since 1990. They never left. The pressure is always there. You've got military bases on a number of Arab soil, and it's definitely not acceptable.
Now, obviously, all this works into the new Middle East, as you say.
That's right.
What would you say is the next step in this plan to unfold and create this new Middle East now that Iraq has virtually been destroyed? What's the next step?
If you look at the chain of destruction, you've got Iraq, which we said the shield, the northeastern shield against Iran, and then they got from there into Syria. Jordan is already sold a long time ago to the UK. Lebanon is just a chaos. And then from there, look at Saudi Arabia. and basically the other Gulf areas. Economic pressure, we've seen that. The manipulation of the oil prices, try to create an economic deficit. Because we must remember that these people are very intelligent. They will never attack Saudi Arabia or attack the Emirates, because these people are different. They pressurize them through economy and make you poor rather than kill you. That's how it works. So the pressure on the Gulf area is through financial pressure, and the money is already in the United States, so they control everything. They got the oil stock and they got the money. If you look at the western part of the Arab world, Egypt, we know the plan was clear. NATO attacked Libya, so you've got nobody else left. The Moroccans are basically sold long ago. And you've got almost a civil war in Algeria, with the Tunisian civil war taking place. So if you look at the 23 countries, each one of them had a problem. But from that point, we ask ourselves question is, where's the Arab League? Definitely it reflects the poor leadership style that exists in the entire Arab world, basically reflects on the Arab League. And we said before that we need to reform the Arab League because the constitution itself does not support voting for building a unified or united Arab army. So I repeat that again, that we need to reform the Arab League, the constitution or the declaration of the Arab League, and start building a new nation through the Arab League as a hub or a flag that we all follow. Last point on this is the culture and youth. Very important that a lot of Iraqis, or millions of Iraqis, were deceived by the American media that Saddam is a tyrant. Yes, he was a tyrant, but look what happened. You supported America against the tyrant, and you became drinking water from the sewage. And this is what we need to understand. We weigh our options. Yes, we've got the leader is bad, but I've got another conspiracy going on. So I have to weigh the options, deal with the leader internally. But be careful that if you break the leader, you might break the entire nation. And this is really the balance. And it only comes through advancement in culture and the way we think.
This is all very provocative information.
Absolutely. It is definitely a huge conspiracy.
Yeah.
But it's very important that we as Arabs or Muslims worldwide read. Because, you know, it's always been announced, but we just don't read on how they're going about controlling the Middle East.
All right. You talked about earlier, we mentioned the United Nations and the international community in terms of their reaction to the U.S. invading Iraq.
Yeah.
What about the Arab League?
Yeah.
And well, there isn't an armed force.
Yes.
Right. So what was their diplomatic?
The Arab League really doesn't have the power whatsoever because of the type of declaration that was signed off by the Arabs in 1945 when it was established. It doesn't allow. The constitution or the declaration doesn't allow building a united army, doesn't allow through the voting that basically becomes binding to all parties. So for example, of the 23 countries, if 15 voted yes and 8 voted no, the constitution said it's binding to the 15 and is not binding to the 8 because they said no. So they are out of it. But in normal voting, it's binding for everybody.
Right.
You know what I mean? For the 23 countries, if the majority voted.
Right.
That's number 2. Number 3, if you look at the name of the Arab League, it is the only organization that doesn't have the word united. United Europe, United Nations,
African Union.
African Union, but you don't have United Arabs. And that's very important because I probably said that before. The Constitution Declaration or the actual documentation to establish the Arab League was proposed by Eden, the British Prime Minister. And the reason for that, they wanted to get to the Arab to do the union before they do it themselves. So do it on the British terms. And that's how the Arabs were very happy with the initiative, but it was actual fact. I put it in your mouth before you actually say it, because it goes on my own terms. So to get into the Arab League and not to play a passive role or a negative role, basically we need to rewrite the constitution and restructure the actual membership of the Arab League, and based on that we will be able to have or establish a united army and have the proper voting system. And from that on, the Arab League should have a member, a permanent seat at the Security Council.
I would love, I know this is a little off topic, but it's a part of the larger
No, definitely,
discussion.
it is part of it.
The question I have is about these recent, going back several weeks ago to the end of last year, the formation of this United Islamic Military Alliance.
Yes.
Okay. It was announced there were 34 Muslim countries, not only Arab countries, but Muslim countries who signed on to it.
Yeah.
And then we're now hearing reports that U.S. and British are sending small forces into Libya to fight Daesh.
That's right. This is basically what I'm saying is that it's all statements, but nothing is happening because it's a hollow. Nothing is really taking place. Because let's agree that the world respects the powerful. The world doesn't respect the polite. And I think the spread of Islam and the power of Islam came because of the power, not because it's a good religion. It's a good religion is one factor. So people don't understand it wrong. It's a factor. But a good religion with weak troops, they're going to get beaten. So it has to always be protected by the power. So the fact here is the Arab League is never going to achieve anything because the leaders are weak, and because of that the League itself has no power whatsoever.
All right, a larger Muslim body, the so-called United Nations of the Muslim Ummah. The OIC.
We already have that, the Conference of the Muslim countries. There's already
the Organization for Islamic Cooperation?
That's right.
Do they have a military arm?
No. No, because again, it's always dictated to them to basically what to have and what not to have. Even on economic cooperation, let's on the bottom line, economic cooperation doesn't exist. Up to this point, you cannot achieve the Arab joint market. You can't do it. So and it's the same language, same land, same resources. A lot of money, a lot of manpower, yet you can't do it. So what we need, strong leaders with a vision. And I think that's where it's going to start. Based on that, United Nations and the Security Council will be obliged to have a permanent seat at the Security Council.
Okay, you're touching on our last question. We have I'm sorry to do this, we have 1 minute left. In terms of the future for Iraq, you're talking about better leadership. What else is necessary to do something to stop the destruction of Iraq?
Well, the destruction of Iraq is going through a very clear direction, which is dividing Iraq into 3 countries or 3 states, the Kurds, Sunni and Shia. Number one, we need to stop Turkey from dealing with the Kurds north of Iraq, because they're attacking them, and some of them have businesses with Turkey. We've got to keep Turkey out, and you can only achieve that through the power of the United Nations, of the Arab League. Number one. Number two, United Nations. Number two, in a solution, the Iraqis need to sit together and put an agenda on how to get out of this, despite the fact of what you are, Sunni or Shia or Kurdi, because the temple is going to collapse on everybody. That's number one. Number two. Number three, I think through the Arab League they need to implement a cultural program to get the Arabs closer, particularly the new generations or the youth and the future. I think through the gathering of youth, through a better understanding, better ideologies and clearer visions, I think that's going to be the salvation for the entire Middle East.
Professor, you're actually helping that. We do have many young viewers, so we appreciate you taking the time to be with us to talk about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We've been talking with Dr. Emaad.muhanna, professor of political science and strategic studies, also a member of the Egyptian scholars, an advisory committee here in Egypt. talking about the crisis in Iraq. We will, in the second segment of the program, have a short break and then come back to talk about some of the lessons we can derive from Surah Al-Baqarah. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the third and final segment of Hudda Tonight. As promised, we're going to be looking at some of the lessons that we can take from Surah Al-Baqarah, the longest of the surahs in the Holy Quran, the cow or the heifer. We are joined to talk about Surah Al-Baqarah with Brother Mustafa Abdul Qayyum. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Mustafa.
Wa alaikum assalam, Brother Ali. May Allah bless and accept our actions today.
Ameen. Welcome to the program. And also, Brother Luqman Hakim is with us. Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much. Brother Mustafa, please, would you like to use your beautiful voice to recite some of the ayats from the surah?
Thank you very much, brother. I'll start, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإذا قيل لهم لا تفسدوا في الأرض قالوا إنما نحن مصلحون ألا إنهم هم المفسدون ولكن لا يشعرون وإذا قيل لهم آمنوا كما آمن الناس قالوا أنؤمن كما آمن السفهاء ألا إنهم هم السفهاء ولكن لا يعلمون وإذا لقوا الذين آمنوا قالوا آمنا وإذا خلوا إلى شياطينهم قالوا إنا معكم إنما نحن مستهزئون الله يستهزئ بهم ويمدهم في طغيانهم يعمهون أولئك الذين اشتروا الضلالة بالهدى فما ربحت تجارتهم وما كانوا مهتدين.
All right. Thank you so much, Brother Mustafa.
You're welcome.
Excellent recitation.
Thank you very much.
Now, Brother Luqman, we would like to ask you to talk about the meaning of what Brother Mustafa just recited for us.
First of all, I would like to begin by saying all praises are due to Allah. May peace and blessing be upon our final messenger of Allah, his family, his companions, and for those follow them in the righteousness until the day of judgment. As we discussed in the previous episode, that people are classified into three kinds in Surah Al-Baqarah. The first type of people are those who believe in Allah, in His Messenger, and also in the word of Allah. They call as al-muttaqin, those who are pious. And we already discussed about them and also their characteristics. And the second type of people are those who reject the word of Allah. They don't believe in Allah, and also they don't accept the message that the Prophet Muhammad is bringing to them. And we also already discussed this type of people. We call them as al-kafirin, or those who are unbelievers in the message or in the word of Allah. And the third category of people, or the third type of people, are those who are hypocrites. They don't belong to the believers, and also they don't belong to unbelievers. So today we would like to look at some of the categories that they have. So today we still look at, and we are still dealing with the third category of the people who are hypocrites. Or al-munafiqin. First of all, let us try to look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the ayah number 11. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us about some of the descriptions of this type of people who are hypocrites. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, when it is said to them, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, when it is said to them, who says to them? Some people say Allah, some people say the Prophet, some people say the believers. But if you look at وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, when it is said to them, so it's very general. It doesn't matter who says to them, whether he is Allah, he is the Prophet, or he is the believer. What they said to them, لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, don't spread the corruption, don't cause the corruption on the earth. قالوا, they would like to reply, إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ, indeed we are only the reformers. So in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing about the al-munafiqin, or the hypocrites. So when it is said to them, don't spread the corruption, don't cause any corruption in this earth. You know the word corruption, if we try to look at the word corruption, we say corruption in Arabic language, al-fasad. Al-fasad, it means when something goes bad. For instance, if we have food and this food has been spoiled, so this food, we cannot eat it. So al-munafiqin, or hypocrites, they always spread the corruption. They don't want to accept the truth. They just want to destroy everything. Even they always make something trouble in the society. So if you look at this ayah is talking about the hypocrites in the early time of Islam, when the Prophet was at Medina. Because in this time there were some people who don't want to accept the message of the Prophet, or probably they just accept Islam for their worldly benefit. As long as Islam is benefit for us or for them, they will accept Islam, but if Islam doesn't give them any benefit, they will reject Islam. So this ayah is telling us that there are category, or there is category of people that they just accept Islam for their benefit or for their worldly benefit. It's of course different from the believers. The believers accept Islam sincerely, totally, whether they are in good or bad situation. But if you look at al-munafiqin, they show or they claim that they are believer, but in fact they are not. That is why when it is said to them, La tufsidu fil ard, don't make corruption on the earth, what they say, what al-munafiqun or the hypocrite would say, they say, Innama nahnu muslihun, indeed we are only the reformer, but in fact it is not.
So not only were they not sincerely embracing Islam,
Yes.
but also lying about it. It's telling that their embracing Islam was sincere and that they're not doing anything wrong, when in fact they were.
Yes, and actually, if you look at one of the characteristics of hypocrites, they like to lie, and also when you give them the trust, they would like to betray it. So the hypocrites are always making problem. They don't accept Islam sincerely. They show that they show us or they claim that they are believer, but in fact they are not.
So, Brother Mustafa, would you like to, I want to ask a question about this. I mean, in the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, the Muslim Ummah was very small. And the concern, I understand that there were people purposely infiltrating the small Muslim Ummah for the purpose of corrupting it as hypocrites. Is that correct?
Well, in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most gracious, all praise be to Allah the Almighty, whom we ask to send down His peace and blessings upon His final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and so on. When it comes down to the topic of hypocrites and how they dealt with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I agree with you. Only when they reached a political level, when they went to Medina, did you find then the emergence of such hypocrites. You will find a lot of them now growing rapidly, because it was a rare case at Mecca, when they were still, when the Prophet ﷺ was upbringing the Muslims, when he was teaching them and raising them of manners and etiquettes.
Yeah.
But when they went to Medina, now the infiltration started taking place. And they had problems with the Jews, the non-Muslims, those who were actually giving the Pledge of Allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ. And as in Tafsir ibn Kathir, as the high scholar Ibn Kathir, may Allah have mercy on his soul, said that regarding this verse, number 12, the Prophet ﷺ, when he was given instructions of how to deal with them, Allah is telling him that when you say to them, okay, that do not spread corruption throughout the lands, it is because of their ignorance, they are actually convinced that they are not corrupting anything at all. So they're deluded. They're in a coma of negligence. So this is what they're going through. Allah is teaching the Prophet ﷺ the mentality. Surah Al-Baqarah, as Brother Luqman stated, it categorizes people. Now this judgment is only given by Allah. We should not judge people. We should not say who is a hypocrite and who is a disbeliever. Unless the person shows signs from his own end, not from our end. Now, when that person, how do you reach him? We learn from these verses. We learn how to reach out to the non-Muslim, or even to the Muslim who has become a hypocrite. And yes, there are Muslims who become hypocrites. Because as the Prophet ﷺ has declared, saying that the signs of hypocrisy are three. Is that whenever he promises, he breaks the promise. Whenever he speaks, he lies. And whenever he is entrusted, he betrays. So imagine the psychology explained by Allah in regards to the hypocrites. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسِ. And if it is said to them to follow the commandments, or to believe as how other people have believed, look at their response. Do we believe like the foolish ones? As-sufaha. Do we believe like the foolish ones? So imagine they're judgmental. This is one of the signs that they judge without reason. So if I want to stay away from the term hypocrisy, because Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with them, see, today he's buried next to the Prophet ﷺ. He's such a great man. But throughout his life, he would always fear hypocrisy. Imagine. Today, us Muslims, we say, as long as I say La ilaha illallah, I'm a good Muslim, and that I shall be admitted into paradise.
Yeah, this is a little of what was behind my question. I mean, when we think about hypocrisy now, we think about it in an individual life. You know, my brother or my son or whatever, he goes to a Western country, right? He's a Muslim, you know, he gets a girlfriend and lives Western life, right, as a Muslim. That's the kind of way we think of it now, but it was a very different thing originally. Right, it was people deliberately trying to target and weaken and corrupt the Muslim Ummah.
Well, in order to weaken the Muslim Ummah, there are many ways and many reasonable and rational ways. For example, when it comes down to what we say as thaqafa, as we say culture, as we say education. And when we think about it, I know it's a little bit out of the topic, but it has some connections. When one thinks about this, if I go to a Western country, I have to understand that I'm about to deal with people who follow different traditions. So it's only natural that they may contradict prophetic traditions. And I have to be tolerant. As long as the tradition that I'm about to practice does not contradict the prophetic teachings, then I'm not violating this verse, that I'm following the godly instructions. It's not wrong. But when it comes, as you said, dating, and I have no rights to say who's a hypocrite. Just because he dated, yes, he has committed a sin. But I'm not allowed to call him a hypocrite unless he starts following the path in which the Prophet ﷺ has ordered us to stay away from.
Now, if he starts putting YouTube videos online saying, it's okay or something like, okay, now he's hurting the Muslim Ummah, right?
He's hurting himself.
Right. Originally he was hurting himself, but now it's getting worse. All right. So all of this was from how many ayats?
Until now it's 2 verses, and we still have until the verse number 16,
okay.
inshallah.
Brother Luqman, would you like to take us to the next ayat?
Yes, I would like to add what the Brother Mustafa is talking about. It is said, وَإِذَا كِيلَ لَهُمْ, when it is said to them. We are still going to deal with some characteristic of hypocrites. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, when it is said to them, no matter who says to them, whether he is Allah, the Prophet, or the believer, or no matter who is. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ, when it is said to them, آمِنُوا, believe, كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسِ, just as the people believe. Who are the people? Anas here is the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the early time of Islam. Look at what would like to reply. What they would like to reply. Anu'minu kama amana sufaha. Should we believe as the foolish people believe? So when you are going to deal with the hypocrites and you are going to invite them to accept Islam, they would reply to your invitation, should we believe as the foolish people believe?
In other words, the believers are foolish.
Yes, so it means that they are belittling, they are insulting the believers. How could you accept the Islam? And you believe that it is true. How could you accept something unseen? Because one of the articles of Islam that we should believe in Allah. Allah is something that you cannot see, something that you cannot touch. How could you believe something that is unseen or something beyond physics? Something that you cannot touch, something that you cannot see, something metaphysic. How could you accept this thing? And also, how could you believe that there is something after life? Are you sure that you will have the next life?
Yeah.
We are not sure.
All these questions are from the hypocrite,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And they're the same questions that are being asked now. It's very timely that this would come up. We just talked about, last night, we talked about atheism and the claims and questions that atheists ask to the believers.
Yes.
Okay, so I imagine that we'll get the reply, what we should say to all these questions of the hypocrite.
Yes. So, for them, it is something silly. If you believe in God, if you believe in there is something that we call as the next life or hereafter, it's something silly for them.
Yeah.
So, they say, Anu'minu kama amana sufaha, should we believe as the foolish people? Foolish people here is the believers.
Yeah, yeah.
Should we have the same faith with those who are believers in something unseen? So they would like to belittle, they would like to insult that the believers believe is something foolish for them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala replied,
okay.
Ala innahum humus sufaha. Indeed, they are foolish people. Why so? وَلَكِنَّهُمْ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. But they don't know it.
They don't know it.
So they claim that they are smart people.
Yeah.
They claim that they are very intellect or very...
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Very smart people, very intellect. They have deep intellectual, but in fact they are not. Because if we are talking about believing in something seen, I think we already discussed in the last episode about searching for God.
For God, yeah.
And we discussed many arguments from the philosophical point of view, from theological point of view, from ontological point of view, and so fast, and so far, and so on. We as believers, we still prove that there is something called God.
God.
Okay.
Their thinking, their way of living life, their value system is only here in this material world. And the question that we have last night, just to repeat, how can you presume to have the position that you know what reality really is, when even your human senses can't perceive all of the spectrum of light or hear the full spectrum of sound, let alone all the other aspects of reality? How can you presume to know that there's no God and no afterlife? You are a limited, finite creature. This is the so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that they are the ones foolish, but they don't know it. Okay, so what's next?
So you'll find, if we can realize something here, in verse number 12, the first commandment, لا تفسدوا في الأرض, do not spread corruption. This is the first point. In the second verse, verse number 13, it says, آمنوا كما آمن الناس, believe as how people believed. Believe in the same way as people around you have believed. So this is the second commandment. Now, in the third one, is, notice this, وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا قَالُوا آمَنَّا. When they meet those who have believed, they say we believe. But when they are alone with their inner selves, with the devils, the inner devils, they say that we were only gesturing with them. We were only joking around.
For social acceptance or whatever.
So we have 3 points. The first point is socially acknowledgeable. The second point is psychologically, the second point is group, or something that can be both social and personal and psychological. And the third point, which is we were only joking, where they're loyal to their own ignorance. So Allah is explaining to the Prophet ﷺ 3 different levels of hypocrisy. That one level which only affects social grounds, the second level which affects both, and the third level which affects only oneself. So there are kinds of people, let's say for example, I come to you and say, do not corrupt in this world, do not kill this young man. And now you're telling me that I'm not killing him, I'm protecting the people. This is your negligence, this is your own, your hypocrisy has sent you to such a certain limit, paganism. This is one level of hypocrisy. Another level of hypocrisy that I tell you, do not kill this man. I'm giving the same example again. Do not kill this man. So you tell me that, oh, no, I'm going to, I wasn't going to kill him, I'm just going to play around with him. You know you're going to kill him, but you're trying to lie to me and trying to cover it up. This is a second level of hypocrisy. The third level of hypocrisy is the personal one. Someone who has a problem with his personality or with his knowledge-based support of information. Like, let's say, for example, instead of getting the information of God from the Quran, he likes to get it from the butcher shop. So he chooses the wrong, the wrong methods or the wrong sources.
Someone not qualified.
Someone, yeah. And this is the problem that we have in our society today. That hypocrisy is an inherited trait. And if the child grows up in a family where he finds his mother, father, sister, everyone lying, hypocritical, they always deceive, betray, break promises, it is only natural that he will learn the art of lying.
You mean not in genetic, but
not genetic-wise,
through social conditioning? Yeah.
Everyone is capable. Even the prophets are capable of lying. But because they know Allah, and Allah has commanded them, and they are too pure to lie, this is why Allah has chosen them. The worst sin committed, I know people generally will say it is shirk, association of partnership with Allah. But the foundation of shirk is lying. Because shirk itself is a lie. When you say that there is a God other than Allah, this is a lie. And this is why it is forbidden. So how do we get rid of this? Now the solution, the verse afterwards, it says, Allahu yastahzi'u bihim. Allah condemns them. Allah sends down mockery upon them. وَيَمُدُّهُمْ فِي طُغْيَانِهِمْ يَعْمَهُونَ. and He stretches them upon their own transgression. They shall swim in it. They shall live in it. That means as long as their heart is wicked, as long as their heart is full of wretchedness, they will never find repentance. Because repentance is only for those who have a pure heart. How can you be wretched and enter the fold of Islam? Unless you change yourself. Allah even says further in the Quran, not in the sequence that we're talking about, saying that Allah shall not change a nation unless they change what is in themselves. So this is an amazing point that we all have to follow. If I have a drug addiction, I do not go up to and say, oh Allah, cure me from the disease. And at the same time, I'm smoking it. Oh Allah, cure me. Allah's not going to change you. Do not be the worst kind of hypocrisy is to be a hypocrite with Allah. Because Allah already knows you. So that means a person is stupid enough to think that he can be a hypocrite with Allah. And inshallah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You're talking about the strength or the lack thereof of the Muslim Ummah. We, in segment 2, were talking about the crisis in Iraq, and we dealt with the larger problems in several Arab countries. And the healing, the solidarity, the strength won't come until we're honest, as you're saying, with ourselves and with Allah. We're running out of time. Just a couple minutes left. How should we end this up, or would you like to move on to the next verse?
Let me try to emphasize that is main topic of this verse. And it is said, وَإِذَا لَقُوا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, the hypocrites, when they are meeting with the believers, قَالُوا آمَنَّا, they said to the believers, آمَنَّا, we believe. وَإِذَا خَلَوْا إِلَى شَيَاطِينِهِمْ, when they are alone with their evil ones, قَالُوا, they said, إِنَّا مَعَكُمْ, indeed we are with you. إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُسْتَهْزِئُونَ, indeed we are only mocking. So if you look at this ayah, you will find that hypocrites have double faces. When they are with the believers, they would like to claim that they are with them. But when they are with their fellow friends, they would like to say that they are with them as well. So if you look at this ayah, hypocrites, they don't have one face, but they have two faces or double faces. It means that they don't have loyalty. They are not loyal, whether to believers or to non-believers. They don't know which one they are standing. So it's very difficult to deal with this category of people. As we just, probably we know that hypocrite is the biggest enemy that we have. Because enemy that we cannot recognize them, enemy within ourselves. This is why we should be careful of this category of people, because they show that they are believers, but in fact they want to destroy Islam. This is the third category of people that we are going to discuss in this episode.
Okay. All right. So as you just said, Brother Luqman, this is, I believe, the third week that you've been talking about Surah Al-Baqarah. So we plan to continue, inshallah.
Inshallah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Brother Mustafa, for being with us.
You're very welcome, brother. It's the least and I can do, and it's an honor for me as always.
All right. And also thank you, Brother Luqman, for being with us. We look forward to continuing this inshallah, next week.
Inshallah. You are welcome.
Excuse me. Dear viewer, we've reached the end of the program for today. Thank you so much for being with us. We hope our discussion was beneficial and the program in general. We want to conclude tonight's episode, and inshallah we'll be back tomorrow with more news, information, and discussions. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.